This week, we welcome Sri Sundaralingam, Vice President of Security and Cloud Solutions at ExtraHop, to discuss securing the hybrid workforce in 2021 and beyond. In the Leadership and Communications section, it's Darth Vader Week, Leadership from the Dark Side. Compassionate leadership is necessary but not sufficient. 3 steps to run better and more efficient meetings and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Most breaches are caused by exploiting oversights in basic cybersecurity fundamentals, but complex hybrid multi-cloud infrastructures make cybersecurity hygiene challenging. Red Seal can help. It shows you what's on your network, how it's connected, and the associated risk across public cloud, private cloud, and physical environments. With Red Seal, you'll get control of your cybersecurity fundamentals so you can protect your organization from the inevitable attack vectors and reduce your cyber risk. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/Red Seal. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Arduous legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter and compete in today's business climate. CyberSaint ingests data from your existing tech stack to deliver unprecedented, patented automation and visibility into enterprise risk and compliance. Don't get left behind. See why the most forward-thinking CISOs and business leaders of Fortune 500 and more partner with CyberSaint. Maximize your cybersecurity program today by visiting securityweekly.com/CyberSaintBSW. As a security leader, CyberArray for Teams was built to make your job easier. Are you struggling to measure your team's skills proficiency, provide critical or relevant role-based training, or translate training investments into meaningful business outcomes? CyberArray for Teams is the industry's #1 NIST-aligned DoD 8140 and 8570 compliance certification and skills training platform. 96% of the Fortune 500 have employees training on CyberArray. CyberArray for Teams. Skills development solved. Visit cyberarray.it/solved to solve your training problems.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 199, recorded December 7th, 2020. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. Joining me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island are my co-hosts, Mr. Paul Asadorian and Mr. Jason Albuquerque, but I think Jason's remote.
Jason is remote today. Yes, it's good to be here. It's good to see we're talking about Star Wars in the next segment. Because I was like yesterday years old when I discovered the significance of Wilrow Hood. If you don't know what that is, I'll talk about it at the top of the next segment.
Jason, welcome. Sorry, I thought you were in studio, but I had so many issues to get started today.
All good. I wish I was in studio, honestly.
Yes, so do I. Scythe is offering a free Purple Team workshop where attendees get hands-on in an isolated enterprise environment for 3 hours. It's scheduled for December 9th, the day before Security Weekly Unlocked. Register for this free workshop now by visiting securityweekly.com/Purple Team SW. Also, in our upcoming webcasts and technical trainings, you will learn how to prevent phishing scams. And not only that, you're going to learn like the ins and outs of what works and doesn't work on email security. Kevin from Great Horn, oh my gosh, it's just every time we talk to him, we learn so much more. You should attend that one. And also how to move beyond vulnerability scan to vulnerability fix. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to see what we have coming up, or visit securityweekly.com/on-demand to view all of our previously recorded webcasts. This segment is sponsored by ExtraHop. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Sri Sundaralingam is the Vice President of Security and Cloud Solutions at ExtraHop. Tongue twister today. An accomplished and dedicated product and marketing executive. He brings years of experience in information security, cloud security, data networking, and enterprise software markets. Sri, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt. Really excited to be with you guys, with you, Paul, and Jason. Look forward to this discussion.
Yeah, we did a webcast with you earlier in the year, but I think this is your first time on Business Security Weekly, so this will be fun. You kind of will break you into the podcast.
Let's go. Let's do it.
All right, so
I'm
let's
all for
start. Yeah, I mean, as we were doing the prep call for this, this concept of hybrid workforce and this kind of the new normal of the hybrid workforce, it is already emerging, right? We know some organizations are going to go back, but whatever kind of transpires, even over the next few months, we're in some sort of permanent hybrid workforce model, I think, for a while. I was talking to a small business owner last night, and she's like, it could take like 5 years to recover from this, from like a normal business operational perspective. And I thought that was a very interesting take. So I want to start first with some challenges around when we think about workforce and we think about hybrid. What do we have to think about in our network design, our network monitoring capabilities to be able to support and stitch together on-premise usage versus remote usage when it comes to our workforce?
Yeah, great point, Matt. So when you think about what many of the industries have gone through this year, right, with the COVID-19 pandemic, I would argue there are several industries like utilities, government, and many more industries where you had policies to lock down your authorized devices, and you limited access provision for guest access or BYOD. And that completely changed this year with the pandemic, right? With scaling out remote access. And in many of these industries, as we look forward to 2021, why would you go back to the old model, right? If you've achieved efficiencies now with scaling out remote access, why wouldn't you continue to enable that for your workforce and think about a hybrid workforce strategy where, you can no longer lock down your authorized devices, right? At your corporate offices, your headquarters or branch offices or factories or whatnot, right? And where you do allow this mobility, right, for authorized devices, where employees can work remotely when they need to, and they can be in the office when needed as we go into 2021. And as you said, we're probably not going back to that old normal anytime soon. So with this new normal, what do you have to think about, right, from overall security policies and dealing with a different threat model, right, and dealing with risk as employees do come back into work, and then enabling this sort of a hybrid strategy. So I would argue you have to look at everything from your security policies, your security architecture, to threat monitoring and response strategies as you bring your employees back into work as we go into next year.
Sri, I agree. And I think it's interesting that the next challenge may be how we all go back to work and what we can do in our security programs to enable that. Because unless you've got a really accurate crystal ball, we don't know how we're going to go back to work. Yeah. I think, and this is going to vary depending on industry and organization, that a certain percentage of people will work from home. I think some statistic I read in a survey said that like 30% of the people said they would love to just work from home, and their employer said, yes, keep working from home. Then you get into the next 70%. I think some will go back to the office, but I also think there's a hybrid model where they may go back to the office for a certain period of time, maybe work from home 4 days a week, go into the office 1 day a week. I also think there's going to be temporary office spaces, right, where people will kind of cycle in and out eventually. As enterprises realize they don't need these massive buildings anymore, there's going to be some kind of hybrid. You're going to have organizations that have each of those flavors kind of in their arsenal. And that brings forth like what do we do in our security programs now to deal with the new way that people are working? Because I do agree it's going to be different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Paul. I mean, at the end of the day, this disruption is going to change the way we work forever. It's not when we go back to the way it used to be, because it's never going to go back to the way it used to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, from leadership perspective, the statistics are showing that we're just as productive, if not even more productive, in a remote workforce. The statistics are showing CFOs are looking at brick and mortar buildings saying, why do we even have these anymore? So,
but Jason, don't forget about the article you talked about where innovation was suffering because of this work from home.
Right. But does that lend to a scenario where we need to be better at collaborating and innovative thinking and in collaboration remotely? Or does that force us to have to be in person all the time? What's the solution? That becomes the question, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a hybrid approach. It's going to be a mix because, if we have a space where we can go in and be together, as needed, I think that's going to be a better option for the future than just having these brick and mortar spots that are just constantly full of people that we don't need in the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, as I agree with you guys, Paul and Jason, even for the companies that have opted to give employees the choice of working permanently remote, they still have to have some way of bringing them together, right, to enable collaboration on a per need basis. So regardless of, whether you're going to try to promote more permanent remote work or whether it's, hybrid strategies, I think this is a trend that the security and IT team has to deal with as we go into 2021.
I think we already have part of this as a good example. And I think about schools. I think about my son, Paul. I know your kids are going through the same thing. We're in this mode right now. And I want to use this a little bit as an example because I think about what my son goes through right now. 2 days a week, he was going to school. They're not right now, but they would go in classroom. So he would take his computer to school. On Wednesdays, everybody's off because they're doing this cleaning. And then on Thursday, Friday, he's remote from home, and you kind of flip the model for the other set of kids. Okay, so let's think about that because that's a very interesting scenario for a remote workforce. Maybe you're on site 2 days a week and you're not on site 2 to 3 days a week. You've got this device. Now, in my son's case, it's his device, it's his MacBook, but it doesn't have, it may not have an endpoint solution on it. It might not have some of the other controls that a corporation uses. Think about that scenario from a security perspective for a second. It's at home 2 days. It's offline 1 day. It's at school for 2 days. How do we start to think about behavior analysis? How do we start thinking about, remember, we were talking about using machine learning and artificial intelligence to help identify outliers. In that scenario, that's pretty difficult.
Yeah, I mean, great point, Matt. And I think the risk model has changed. So whatever your old framework that you had for monitoring and responding to threats, you have to reassess it, right? Like, for example, through remote access, you could limit access to specific applications and resources, right? When you scaled up remote access. But when that employee goes back into work with their authorized and BYOD devices, right? Now you're in a situation where they're going to have possibly, like, especially in the case of, let's say, authorized devices, they could have, more access than they had through remote access. And, an infected device, whether it has a endpoint protection capability or not, I mean, it's a higher risk device, right? In terms of when those employees go back into work, and how do you kind of think about monitoring, those risky behavior, right? I mean, the threat itself could have initiated when the employee was at home, right? The device may have gotten infected. There have been some suspicious activities coming through remote access, but now that employee is back at corporate and have full access to the corporate network.
Yeah. Jason, I'm curious how you start thinking about this from a policy perspective. Then that drives into some process work, and then it drives into some security tool control discussions.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, when we first kicked into remote workforce, we spent a lot of time just working on process with our most high-risk business units, right? So finance, HR, business units of that nature that are really dealing with our most sensitive information. And we started redefining processes so that way we could enable the remote workforce. I think step one is understanding the process. Step two is understanding what type of data is moving around. And then from there, figuring out what you need to protect. But we spent a good amount of time focused on HR process and finance process out of the gate.
Yeah. I mean, the process is a big part of this.
Yeah, you don't need process. You just need SASE, and you're all good. But I say that half kidding. It actually, when you dig into that technology, could really help your organization, because I think you can work towards a point where it doesn't matter what device or what type of device someone has. Now, you still have to protect the data, so that's a thing. But in terms of brokering access and monitoring, to Shree's point, where people are accessing your applications, the secure access service edge, right, is the technology that, in my opinion, has the most potential to allow you to do that. And Shree, I'm sure it's on your radar to be able to integrate with that technology so we can monitor that traffic and make decisions.
Yeah, definitely a great point, Paul. I think as architectures are evolving, right, in terms of supporting this remote and mobile workforce more and more, whether it's SASE, some combination of SASE with security architectures and the corporate campus networking perspective. Technology. Let's say if I were to put this argument in front, a network-based approach to threat monitoring and response, right, can help a lot of organizations, right? Rather than just kind of relying on, let's say, agent-based or log-based approach, if we can also incorporate, a network-based approach, then whether it's, managed devices or whether it's unmanaged and uninstrumented devices, as you go into this new normal, you'll be in a lot better position in terms of monitoring sort of your behaviors of your end users, whether they are coming through a VPN termination point, or whether they're at their corporate network, or they're going direct to net, right, with the SASE type of architecture. You can monitor those risk scenarios in a corporate HQ environment or remote offices environment, and then be able to equip your security and IT teams to deal with incidents, right, and those risk scenarios.
Shree, it's really interesting. I read an article that was talking about this with respect to cloud architecture, but I also liken it to SASE-based architecture, and that is, I think the DMZ is making a comeback. And one of the things you can do is, people are maybe over, working from their friend's house for a day or whatever. They're working in different places and they want to go check their email, and they do that from an untrusted device. Well, when you connect into the VPN architecture, if you're coming from that untrusted device, you've only got access to certain limited amount of things. Essentially, you're like DMZ, right? It's not public facing, but you're coming from this level of trusted or untrusted device. You have access to that. If you can prove to me who you are even further and validate your machine even more, maybe you're at another corporate headquarters or corporate office somewhere, you have access to more stuff. And you can design specifically that architecture. And really, it's kind of the resurgence of the DMZ, which is crazy if you think about it.
Yeah. Your perimeter is not dissolved. Your perimeter is expanded, if anything, right? I mean, your attack surface has increased. And so I absolutely agree with you, Paul. When you think about it, whether it's even, for example, there's a lot of organizations that have accelerated their cloud adoption, right? So we're living more and more in a hybrid cloud world today as well. So I think the job of the security teams has even gotten difficult in terms of monitoring and responding to threats, right, in a hybrid world environment. And as architectures are being kind of rethought, right, projects like network segmentation and access policies, for example, how do you give them the right tool, right, in terms of dealing with the hybrid enterprise architectures and dealing with new threats as they evolve.
Sri, one of the stats you gave me when we were preparing for this is you're still seeing 60 to 70% unmanaged devices. I mean, we know that the endpoint vendors are loving this environment because they're putting endpoints on as much stuff as they can. But there's still a big percentage of devices hitting the network that are unmanaged. Some of them can't have agents on them. So how do you get visibility into some of this stuff? I just thought that was a very interesting stat because we would instinctively think, oh, we just throw an endpoint agent on all of our devices and we're set. But with that kind of unmanaged device number, that's not the solution either.
No, and I'd love to dig into that stat a little bit more, guys, because what are those devices? Are they IoT devices? Are they, are they traditional endpoints like laptop, tablet type of deal? Like what's the profile of these?
Yeah, great question, Jason. So when a lot of the organization went to remote work earlier this year, we as an Extra Hub did a study through the threat telemetry that we collect worldwide, and we analyze petabytes of data, right, on a daily and weekly basis. So what we saw was very interesting. Initially, even though the connectivity went down in terms of the end users not being at the offices anymore, there was still a lot of treadmills to obviously it's printers, right? Your smart televisions to video, right? Your video monitoring systems, you name it, right? So a lot of those devices initially were active, and then they also went down. The IT team started to turn down those. I mean, not the video monitoring, security monitoring, but the treadmills and a lot of those IoT smart screens or smart TVs. A lot of them were going offline. So it was really, really interesting to see how they were trying to contain risk when they were at office. Now, as you go back to work, a lot of those devices are going to get turned back up on, right? So yeah, that 60-70% of those unmanaged devices are there's a good percentage of that is IoT devices that are unmanaged. Well, they're managed in terms of you're deploying them for a particular use case, particular benefit for your organization, right? Like treadmills, for example, right? That is connected to your corporate network, but they're unmanaged or uninstrumented from a security perspective, for example, because they may not even generate logs for you to look at. If there was a targeted attack that compromised one of those devices, and then the actor, right, the attacker, navigated from that compromised device to internally within your corporate environment, it's very difficult to go back and trace, where did this attack originate from, right? So definitely a good percentage of those devices are IoT devices. And there's also, on a normal scenario, we would see a lot of BYOD devices as well. So that's where that number was coming from, which is quite scary.
And we know we covered earlier today some of the Android apps out there that are extremely vulnerable. Some of these are embedded in some of these TVs and other devices that are sitting on your network.
I think my treadmill runs Android, Matt. Tie it all together. Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
I have a smart treadmill, and it does run Android.
Yeah, some of your smart TVs or some of these other devices could be potentially running Android. And we know there's a bunch of vulnerabilities out there, so they are gateways.
When you upgrade the firmware, just talk about how weird the networking is. It won't do that over an encrypted Wi-Fi connection. It has to be an open Wi-Fi connection. So talk about the challenges of securing some of these devices, both in your homes and in the workplace. It can be very challenging, forcing you to make rules and exceptions to those rules to support these devices, which we hope we apply a proper network segmentation. But of course, since Sri is here, you want to monitor for that to make sure that your segmentation is it really segmented, or is it just on a different subnet and there's any allow?
It's a great point, Paul. Like a default configuration on many of these IoT devices, whether it's smart TVs or from that to video monitoring system to even treadmills, the default configuration does not enable SSL or secure communication. And while the IT team has the best interest to configure deploy properly, sometimes they miss it, right? So being able to monitor, sort of IoT devices that whether they're provisioned for secure communication, right? Whether they're sort of deviating from their normal behavior, right? That's all very critical. And I would say, it should be a double-pronged effort, right? Secure those devices, as you said, enable secure communication, patch them, right? If you can patch them for any latest vulnerabilities. And then the flip side of it is monitor them, right? All of these uninstrumented, unmanaged devices from a security perspective, right? As well as BYOD devices when they're all going to come back into the corporate environment.
Yeah. Sri, when we think about just the base deployment model now for monitoring your network? We got to think about on-prem, we got to think about remote access, and we have to think about cloud at a minimum, right? How do you effectively deploy that and then bring all that back together in a centralized way to really support threat detection and response, right? Because we do need some correlation with logs, maybe we do need some correlation with threat intelligence, but how do we really get good visibility into those kind of three main categories of network areas?
Yeah, no, great question, Matt. And that's part of the struggle right now, right? Like the security teams have disjointed data set, right? Because the on-prem environment may be instrumented one way, and cloud is instrumented differently, and then maybe your VPN termination points are instrumented using a different strategy as well. So like when you have these disjointed data sets, this is what makes security and IT teams' job a lot difficult, as you guys know. Like how do you have a 360 viewpoint in terms of emerging threats, right? To be able to respond a lot quickly, regardless of whether it's on-prem cloud, right? Or your VPN termination point. So, I mean, one thing I can say ExtraHop has done well is our Reveal X 360. When you could deploy our sensors anywhere, right? In AWS, Azure, GCP environment, to on-premise data centers and campus environments, and then using SaaS and cloud delivered services, we're able to provide a full 360 viewpoint, right? In terms of looking at threats, regardless of wherever they're emerging, and then being able to provide an investigative workflow from a threat detection monitoring perspective to the security teams. And then to your other point about how do you kind of tie it in with logs and other threat telemetry data you're getting, it's important to integrate, right, with the customer, the organization's security stack. Whether it's using API-based approaches and pushing out the relevant data, helping customers stitch that data together to be able to use the full set of arsenal available to them in the environment.
Yeah. I mean, those are the two key pieces for folks like on my staff, right? It's making sure that they have the right information they need bubbled to the top along with the context that they need, right? So that integration piece is a key item for me. I mean, my staff can't effectively respond without that context, right? In that integration into all the different type of applications. I'm even talking hosted applications like the Salesforces of the world, Azure Active Directory, right? Getting all of that context in together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was curious, Jason, how you've kind of approached it a little bit, knowing that you're in this hybrid environment. You've been there for a while, and I'm just, obviously integration's important, but also just the base data collection. Like, do you streamline product selection so that you can collect more stuff from a single solution, so that minimizes integration? Because a lot of point solutions here would be difficult, I think.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? So we've made the transition away from going to those best of breed Gartner Magic Quadrant point solutions that don't integrate well, and we're starting to pull away from that and going toward more of an ecosystem approach, because we're finding that we get better context. Maybe they're not, maybe one or two of the solutions in our ecosystem isn't in that Magic Quadrant, but it integrates so well because it's part of one cohesive ecosystem. We're getting better context, better data, being able to bubble that data up to the top quicker.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the big strategic shifts in this hybrid environment, is looking at the solutions, figuring out what integrates well, minimize the number of integrations, because any single solution, they change their API, just all the nightmares associated with, I think, integrating lots of solution gets difficult.
Yeah, we've 100% gone to that ecosystem type approach, right? Versus a whole bunch of point solutions that we're trying to stitch together that break often, right? And don't integrate well together, aren't built for purpose to integrate together. So yeah, that ecosystem approach has been successful for us.
Another consideration here, Matt and Jason, is also how do you get the IT and the security teams to work together as well? Talking about this data set that you have, right? whether it's logs or network data, for example. Like, how do you get these teams to, when you have, whether not just like your highest priority, most critical incidents you're dealing with, but even like day-to-day challenges that, the security and the IT teams need to work together. Kind of as we go into this new normal, where a lot of organizations have accelerated their quote unquote their digital transformation projects, right, which was forced by the pandemic. One of the trends we are also seeing is, enabling common solutions and common data set to IT and security teams to work on their specific set of issues, and whether it's day-to-day issues or projects will help the organizations quite a bit. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Jason.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's not only the technical integration we need, right? It's the business unit department integration we need. I've spoke about it on the show plenty of times. At this point, our IT operations team is a glorified security team, right? Because those two teams are so integrated together in the day-to-day operations and projects, initiatives, working incidents together. We basically have another set of security professionals on the IT operations team, which is outstanding.
Yeah. Especially when you have a network issue that creates an outage because it's an availability issue, but it could also be a security related issue.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this has been our experience as well at ExtraHop. We found, a lot of our customers, their security teams, even though may buy our product and they deploy their network, the IT ops team, right? To your point, Jason, will get interested in terms of, hey, can we share that solution with you? And having that, the common solution, common data set, along with integrated with their processes, what we've seen is it helps them quite a bit in terms of dealing with everything from a malware outbreak or a ransomware outbreak to your day-to-day, application network-related issues that can be triggered through a security-related issue, like an infected device, perhaps as well. So,
I mean, the amount of efficiency you build by having those teams collaborate and be strong together, everywhere from identifying, containing, and then eventually to the recovery aspect, right? I mean, having those teams integrated just allows you to be that much more efficient and effective in your responses. There's no doubt.
And being more proactive is what you're saying also, right? Correcting issues so that it doesn't happen again.
Our key themes for 2021, ecosystem and integration. Shri, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, Shri.
You too.
Thanks, Shri.
To learn more about protecting your hybrid workers, please visit securityweekly.com/extrahop. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.